Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Midlife Academy podcast. I'm your host, Bree Smith. My guest today is Dr. Ellen J. Kennedy. Ellen is the founder and executive director of World Without Genocide, a human rights organization located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and with special consultative status to the United Nations. Ellen teaches, speaks, and writes locally and globally about human rights issues, including genocide. She also advocates for policy and legislation at city, state, and national levels to support peace and justice, and is a representative to the United Nations Department of Global Communications. In addition to all this work, Ellen is also an adjunct professor of law at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul. Ellen has received significant recognition for this work, including the Outstanding Citizen Award from the Anne Frank Center in New York, the Distinguished Alumni Award from Northern Michigan University, the Prominent Minnesotan from the University of Minnesota, and the Changemaker Award from Minnesota Women's Press. Ellen Kennedy, it is my great delight to welcome you to the Midlife Academy podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be included.
Well, I've just read this bio, and you have such an impressive resume. And what strikes me is that it's across so many fields, that you're touching on higher education, international affairs, advocacy. And so what I'd love to just get my head around is your career path. Like, how do we chart the course that just seems to be getting kind of bigger and bigger?
I think that most people envision that there is a linear path for each of us. And for me, it's been anything but that. I have what I call a hippity hop brain. I just get fascinated by interesting little diversions and detours and opportunities to learn some new things. I think in a way that was a product of my upbringing. My parents were both avid readers. We were encouraged to be very independent, to explore, to follow whatever interest areas we had. And I've been like that my whole life. My academic background reflects that as well. I chose a double major in college. I have 3 master's degrees in different areas. I have 2 PhDs because I love going down those different rabbit holes. There's almost nothing that I don't find engaging.
Incredible. And so what is interesting to me is how you have that like voracious appetite for learning, but then find ways to apply that to your career, to your civic engagement, where you can bring in, what you're learning, what you're fascinated by, what your passions are, but find that application to career. So I wonder if we can dig in a little deeper into some of these shifts. So I'm really interested in the shift from marketing professor to leading the Center on Holocaust and Genocide Studies and founding the World Without Genocide. So that, that pivot seems really striking to me. So I'm curious about what prompted you to take this leap.
I think that looking at it, excuse me, in the abstract, it looks like a leap, but it's really not a leap at all because I'm very action-oriented. I'm very ends-directed. And whatever I do always has an action component to it. It's just how I was raised. My father was a surgeon, and he was more than a surgeon. He saw applications throughout his life to extend what he did in the medical sphere to social justice, to civic engagement, and so on. So that's the model that I had. For example, when I was a marketing professor, which I was for decades, I saw opportunities to create interesting internship possibilities for students, to run programs that existed on the campus where I was, and even to create new programs. There's this opportunity often that I see where there's a little point of entry that nobody else seems to be exploring. And yet, to me, it's wide open and it's beckoning. It's saying, approach here, take advantage of this. And that's been true in all the academic work that I've sought in, and now in all the civic engagement. I see these possibilities, and I I choose to pursue them because they have an end goal that in some way fits the overall framework of my life. And if I can share that framework, I'm Jewish, and from the time I was a little girl going to synagogue, I heard the phrase Tikkun Olam. And in Hebrew, that means repair of the world. And that's what I learned from the time I was little, 5, 6 years old. So with everything, that's that's really the orientation. Is there something to do that in some way will create a social justice benefit that will protect people who need perhaps some additional support in their lives? That's the framework.
Incredible, incredible. And I hear your identification of seeing your kind of entry point. I hear this kind of fearlessness and focus. But I'm curious about, a lot of folks when we talk to in the Midlife Academy facing a career change approach it actually with quite a bit of fear and uncertainty about what might come from taking that leap. So I'm curious to hear, was it all fearlessness? What was that leap like for you? And what maybe advice you might have for someone that sees that opportunity that they really care about and really want to go for, but feel kind of held back by that fear and uncertainty.
I don't know if it's fearlessness or naivete. And in some ways, they are polar ends of a spectrum. If it's something that interests me, I pursue it fully. I say to people, I have two speeds, off and full, and that's it. There are times when perhaps it's not wise, but that's how I have always operated. So when I left a very secure academic position to do something very different, to transition fully into working in human rights, it was not a wise financial decision. It was leaving a professional position that I had essentially built around the interests that I had and issues that I cared about. And I didn't weigh things. I just I saw an opportunity and I chose it. And I think in general, many people who are like me in terms of choosing to do something fully, to embrace it wholeheartedly in a way that seems somewhat new from what we might have been doing for a long time. We don't have that calculus of the pros and cons, of the pluses and minuses. We just go for it. I saw the same thing in my brother, where he too saw an opportunity, pursued it, even though it may not have been the wisest move for him to make. I don't sit and question. I don't sit and weigh the alternatives. If it's something I want to do, I do it. And I've been like that since I was quite young. When I was 18, a friend of mine who lived in a different state contacted me and said, I'm going to go to France for the summer. There's a study program. Would you be interested in coming along? Well, my parents had never been to Europe. I had never been to Europe. My parents didn't know her parents, but I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. And I asked my parents, and they said, do you really want to go? I said, sure. So they let me go. And it wasn't, should she, shouldn't she? They supported wholeheartedly things that I chose to pursue. And I've tried to do that for people who work with me, for my own children. But I fully realize that that's not the way that many people choose to take opportunities in their lives. I fully realize that, nor should they, nor should they.
Right. Right. No, but it sounds like, you had a clear understanding of who you are and your motivations and your focus, and that drove like the type of decision you made, the type of pivot that you made. That, you know, might be a kind of not a look before you leap, but a leap and figure it out kind of move.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
here I go.
Yeah, 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 right. No, and we talk to others that want a lot of preparation. We've talked to other career coaches who talk about laying down mattresses to kind of cushion, you know, the leap. But I really appreciate getting this insight of like another way of doing it, and that it comes down to taking that time to like know who you are and reflect to understand how you want to go about that pivot. So I'm curious about, go ahead. It looks like you have something to add to that.
I think there's a very important element here as well, and that is a sense of personal efficacy, self-efficacy.
Mhm.
I believe when I take something on that I have the ability to see it through, and that if I need certain supports in some areas, people with skills that might be somewhat different than mine, complementary to mine, if I need other resources, that I will have the ability to seek out those additional supports. Again, relying on myself, though, to find them, to seek them out.
Yeah.
And not everybody has that sense of self-efficacy. I was raised with that.
Mm.
And and I can't imagine how different my life would have been had I not been nurtured in that kind of direction. I was blessed. I was blessed. Both of my parents were truly can-do people.
Right.
We lived in northern Michigan when I was a young girl, a very small town. And my mother did a lot of volunteer work with the March of Dimes. And one thing she did was organize a telethon. So an opportunity on the local TV station to raise a lot of money for the March of Dimes. And I don't know how she did it the first year, but she would invite some of the Green Bay Packers players to come and participate in the telethon. I remember
Yeah.
them standing in our kitchen.
Wow.
Now, that takes a great deal of chutzpah, if I can use the Yiddish word. I
Yeah.
don't think she weighed pros and cons and should I do this, shouldn't I? She
Yeah.
thought, oh, that would be a great fundraising moment. And she did that. And that was the kind of environment that I saw.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that made such a
Yeah.
difference in my own sense of self-efficacy.
Mhm.
It
Absolutely.
really did.
Absolutely. Mhm. So you made reference to the importance of kind of reaching out to make connections
Yes.
to help, you know, support what you were up to. Often when we're making a career shift, the challenge is that we're kind of having to reinvent our networks and build new connections with folks, you know, in this new sphere that we're hoping to migrate to. So I'm curious about, you know, how you did that work to build connections across organizations. And it sounds like you're operating globally. So, you know, on this global level of building this network around your work involving human rights and genocide.
In a way, your introduction to this subject makes me sound very transactional.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And it hasn't been like that.
Yeah.
Um, First, I'm a joiner. I like to be part of a group. My parents both belonged to all the civic organizations in our small town. So I've been president of Rotary clubs. I'm on the board of a number of organizations. And and I do that first because I think it's perhaps the right thing to do to lend some support to different organizations if I have some ability to bring certain issues forward. But second, I just like it. It's a way to meet people. So I have an extensive holiday card list. And the people that I meet are not transactional in terms of the base of our relationship. They become my dear friends. And if they're not going to be my friends, then they're not on my holiday card list. You know, in other words, there's a truth and a sincerity in that relationship, or else I'm not going to connect there. I'm
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah.
Again, I'm zero or full.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero or full. It
Yeah.
drives my daughter crazy. She'll say, oh, Mom, what did you think of such and such a movie? And she knows it's either 0 or I'm going to wax ecstatic.
Yeah, yeah.
No middle road.
That's great. Yes. Okay, let's talk human rights. Let's talk World Without Genocide. We actually have a course in Midlife Academy called Cultivating Purpose, where we are inviting a cohort of folks to come together to reflect on really kind of like what matters to me, what are my sparks, what are the social issues, global issues that matter most to me, and how can I work to impact change. And I think World Without Genocide is just this like wonderful example of purpose in action. So I'm curious about how your path to identifying your purpose and applying it to the work you're doing with World Without Genocide.
Boy, you make it sound so conscious and deliberate. Absolutely not conscious and
Okay,
deliberate.
tell me about that. Yeah.
Um, I was a professor for decades, and I always had a feeling that there was something else that I was meant to do that was perhaps a little bit different. And the image that I had in my mind was that there was a door, and the door was open just a few inches, and it wasn't open far enough for me to get through that door, that opening. I was in Rwanda in 2005, so it was 11 years after the genocide there, and that's a whole other story. But as a result of that trip, I came back and I was teaching somewhat differently because I had been deeply touched by the people I had met and so on. And one day in class, when I had been teaching about issues related to that terrible tragedy, a student said, "What are we going to do about this?" And I had been running a program that I had created at the university where I was interacting with um, a school that was focusing on immigrant and refugee youth. I was partnering hundreds of students from my university at this high school, not to tutor and mentor, which is hierarchical, but in collaborative work. I'm not a fan of hierarchical relationships. So this was collaborative work. And I was doing this. I was patting myself on the back.
Yeah.
And my students' question, what are we going to do about this, was really eye-opening to me. And it was eye-opening because I was not asking myself that question. She was the only one in the room saying, what are we going to do about this? I was so embarrassed for myself and for the other 29 students in the class. And that was a sharp moment for me to really think, what am I going to do about this? And I realized I needed a different kind of engagement that perhaps was a little bit broader and wider. And what I did, this was in, as I said, 2005, and the genocide in the Darfur region of Sudan had begun in terrible ways just a few years before that. And it was really not in prominence in the media. So I learned about an organization started by another student. So again, this is 21 years ago. His name is Mark Hannes, and he was at Swarthmore College out east. And his organization was called the Genocide Intervention Network. Mark is the grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors, and he felt that the Darfur genocide was happening on his watch. He needed to do something. I learned about Mark. I met Mark, had him come and stay at my house. I learned from him what to do, and I built my organization based on what he was doing. I'm still in touch with Mark 21 years later. Everything I do, I really attribute to Mark, and he knows I do that very publicly. He was decades younger than I was, and that's something I want people to understand as well. We assume we can only learn from people older and wiser. No, no, no. We can learn from anyone and everyone. And Mark brought me great wisdom, and I'm forever indebted to him. At any rate, I chose then to take action because here I am, a Jew, and a genocide was happening on my watch. and the Rwandan genocide and the terrible tragedy in former Yugoslavia in the 90s happened on my watch. And I was impervious. I was doing what I was doing, but I was not watching. I was not looking. I was not listening. And all of this was smack dab in front of me. I was in places where the universe was saying, Ellen, pay attention.
Yeah.
And I was not fully seeing. So it took Ina's question, what are we going to do about this for me, to finally fully see. Those signs had been there. In 1991, I think it was, I was in Ukraine, and at the time it was still part of the Soviet Union. And I was in a city that had been devastated during the Holocaust. I didn't see it. I was there doing something else. I mean, I had sign after sign after sign. So my message to people is always see what's in front of you.
Right.
And that's what I finally did. And now today, I try to be mindful of what's in front of me. And those are perhaps people would say turning points or whatever. No, they are just what I am meant to be doing.
Right.
And I'm not a touchy-feely, crystally kind of person. I used to teach statistics of all things. I'm very logical and linear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in many ways, and this sounds really like I'm a nutcase, but in many ways, everything in my life has pointed to what it is I do now.
Right.
Everything.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really, really, yeah, just really inspiring. And I want to underscore your relationship with Mark from Swarthmore. That I think is really an incredible story, as you say, of like mentorship and role models that can be intergenerational. And like you say, we often look to elders, and as we should, but that these sources of inspiration and affinity and collaboration can come from all places. And what I really want to pull out of this is often with folks looking to make that transition, what we tell them to do is identify the person that is doing it and invite them out for coffee, have a conversation, build that relationship. You don't have to start from scratch because someone out there is driven by the same things you are. Go meet them,
Yes.
and who knows what you can build from there. And I think your story there just captures that so well.
I feel really blessed that over the years, since I've really been doing this very independent work, if I can call it that, through World Without Genocide, I've been able to meet many women who are doing what I'm doing, not in the same sector, but late career. They too found something that became a real passion and fully immersed themselves in it. And in speaking with them and getting to know them and having them sit around my dining room table over brunch, what I've realized is that we all, the 10 of us, have that same sense of efficacy, that same sense of commitment, that same sense of purpose. And that's not true for everyone we meet, nor should it be. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I think it's wonderful to see people who are doing things that you might admire and say, I would like to connect with that person and work alongside that person. Perhaps not be the leader, but work alongside or provide some support. And that's absolutely critical because none of us can do this work alone. There are so many skills that are necessary in the work that I do that I don't have. I just don't have. Anybody who goes from zero to full like that is missing a whole lot in the middle. And I need those people who have those skills that are in the middle. And I need them and appreciate them and value them very, very deeply.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say to people. Think about who you are. Don't try to subvert who you are to become someone new,
Right.
because we are who we are.
Yeah.
And find ways to meet dreams and goals and visions that you have within understanding who you are.
Right. Right. Oh, that's a great message. Well, talking about all this work you're doing, this is difficult, heartbreaking work. How do you keep going?
That's a question that people always ask me, always. And some days I'm going to use a very technical term. You ready? Whooped.
Well, yep. Yeah.
I get whooped,
Yeah.
and we all get whooped. And I say that to the people I work with as well, and to feel that you can share that and find healthy ways to deal with it. Exercise, see a therapist, be outdoors, whatever the healthy ways are. Lately, I've been watching French murder mysteries and eating coffee chip ice cream in the evening.
Yeah.
Whatever is going to work.
Right.
And I also am deeply, deeply nourished by the people I work with and by the people I come into contact with who say, thank you for doing whatever it was, or I enjoyed that lecture, or thank you for the class. Those small words of gratitude and appreciation and recognition for the work carry me through months and months and months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a message I want to share with people.
Oh.
Remember to say thank you to people. Remember to acknowledge what they do always. And even acts that you think are small and perhaps not of great importance loom large to the person who did them, and recognize that.
Yeah. Well, Ellen Kennedy, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me for this conversation and for our listeners to hear from you today. It was a great pleasure to have this conversation with you. To learn more about Ellen's work, please head to worldwithoutgenocide.org. And to keep up on upcoming Midlife Academy courses, find other podcast episodes and webinars, you can head to midlife.umn.edu. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.